All right. Grant, tell us a little bit, just give us the background a little bit. How did you get into real estate? What was your life prior to? And get us to today, if we could.
Yeah, so like most people, I did not plan on being in real estate. This is my 20th year in the business full time. I started in the tech industry. So after I graduated from college, I went to San Francisco and worked for a large tech firm and burned myself out after 2 years. And came back to Nashville, was sitting at a bar named Sam's. I don't know if it exists anymore in Hillsborough Village. And I happened to sit next to a developer named John Coleman Hayes, kind of an old legend from the 50s, 60s, and 70s. And John had a new condo development he was working on in West End. And we just chatted about it. I woke up the next morning, recalled the chat, went over there, reserved a condo, and thought, man, this is the best. Like, I've got a plan. And then about 6 months later, I got a call from the on-site agent who said, hey, your condo's ready. You're ready to close. And I was like, shit, no, like, I made no plan. I thought I had a plan, but, I went to go get a mortgage and, I was like, man, mortgages are expensive and all that kind of good stuff. And so the agent kind of said, well, would you like us to replace your contract? And I was like, yeah, that'd be great. She said, great, we do a 50-50 split. And I said, what's a 50-50 split? And she said, well, 50% of the increase that happened, we'll give back to you and we keep 50%. And so I got a $38,000 check. And I was like, this is the best business on planet Earth. I'm going to go get licensed. And I literally enrolled in school the next day and went to get a real estate license. So that's the genesis.
You started by an assignment right there.
I know, fell into it backwards.
Okay,
no grand plan.
Most of us do.
No undergrad, no undergrad degree in real estate development, nothing like that.
All right. Are you an Auburn grad?
Grad.
Nice. Great.
Or down.
There you go. What'd you study?
Logistics of all things.
Okay.
So I had a minor in MIS, Management Information Systems, and that was what I took with me to San Francisco, where I was coding in COBOL, C++, and if you guys are familiar with all those archaic languages, that was what it was.
So there's no mysteries typically, right? Does it start to make sense a little bit? I always think if you just want to see where they are, just ask a few questions of their past. And to me, this makes sense because I think you're in the bleeding edge of tech and you're really a data guy. And we'll talk more about that, but it certainly shows in your involvement in real estate. So
yeah, I definitely approach it more from the data driven. If you ask me what color the balls were in the listing, I don't have a clue.
Gotcha.
No idea. But if you ask me what the relative price was per square foot or what the trending price per square foot is, then I've got that memorized.
I take it.
So it's just different style.
Right. Love it. What's approximate lifetime sales?
I don't even is there wood to knock on over here?
Knock it. This is wood. This is pure IKEA.
Projected 2 years from now should reach the 1 billion mark.
It's legit.
So yeah, last year was 133 million.
And you don't have a team, you own your own brokerage.
That's correct.
You've got a few people that work with you.
Yeah, you don't have to have a huge team, right? That's sort of like a misnomer in this business is that you got to have a listing specialist, a buyer specialist, a coordinator, an assistant,
right?
A person to get your latte, a person to get your dry cleaning. And some of those really big teams work great, but you don't have to have it.
Yeah.
I do all my own contracts. I don't let anyone touch a contract. It's only me.
So you do your contract to close?
All of them. Yeah, it may take an extra hour or two before I can get to it if I'm out showing.
Yeah.
But most people are like, that's fine. 1 hour, you let them know, set the expectation.
Yeah.
They appreciate that you're doing it. Therefore, you know every bit of the transaction too. So part of being, I think in the tech industry is it makes you kind of OCD.
Yep. And
so that OCD really works well. So for all the OCD people in the room, you will excel in this.
Is there any tech tips or things that you utilize to optimize your business or your life that helps manage this machine?
So I probably don't use as much tech as some others do, but I use the package that we already pay for. So Transaction Desk, I use AuthentiSign within that. I still log everything into Excel. So before I go to bed at night, I log all my activity into Excel so I can track it. So I'm actually fairly low tech. I just have a process that has worked that I continue to use, continue to improve on. It's just become a habit. So, you know, everyone talks about creating healthy habits. Healthy habits aren't necessarily the newest, latest, greatest thing. Healthy habits can be what's worked. And if you continue working it, it'll continue to work for you.
We see and know of you doing a lot of short term, right? I mean, you kind of become the short term Jedi. And tell us kind of how you got into that and tell us about the short term side of your business and why it's become such a huge part other than Nashville. Obviously, there's big demand for that, but are you going after that? How do you see that market increasing, things like that?
Yeah, so, you know, 20 years ago when I got into business, I was what you would call a general practitioner.
Yep.
And I did start off with a partner for 3 years where I learned a lot of things. And then I ended up suing that partner in federal court and won over $180,000. So not all partners are great partners. It's kind of what I learned. But as a general practitioner, I think you learn how to deal with stress very well because you're all over the place. You're not really focused in any one part of the business, if you will. And so when that relationship came to an end, I determined very quickly that I needed to do something different. And I was talking to another industry professional that you guys probably know, Richard Courtney, and he gave me the best advice I ever got. He said, specialize in something. And I was like, well, I don't really know what to specialize in. He said, doesn't matter, something. And so at that time, downtown condos were just kind of being built. You know, the Viridian was on the books, about ready to be constructed. And then that was followed by a flurry of downtown activity. And so I said, I'm going to specialize in high-rise condos. No one else was doing it at the time. Not only am I going to specialize in it, but I'm going to analyze the ever-living shit out of it. And I'm going to put that information out there on a blog and just let people read it, react to it, comment on it, tell me I'm wrong, tell me I'm right, tell me I'm an idiot. And so I did that. And specializing in that industry, that part of the industry, was what took me from a normal, floundering, non-specialized to a specialist, known for something.
Yep.
Once you kind of get bored of things, you know, sometimes. Once you kind of did all that, you know, Chad Woller started kicking ass and taking names. I was like, man, condos suck. And so I was looking.
I don't want that Instagram profile.
Yeah, I mean, I was like, I was looking for something different, something that was like challenging and hard that I knew people wouldn't do. And so that's when short-term rentals caught my attention as something difficult. So just to define what a short-term rental is, it's any rental under 30 days. Long-term rental is any rental over 30 days. Long-term rentals are not regulated basically whatsoever. I mean, you can put as many tenants as you want into a house. They can have as many cars as they want. They can stay for 31 days, 210 days, 1,000 days. They're unregulated for the most part in this city. Short-term rentals are one of the most regulated parts of our industry. They're nearing 40 laws since 2014, specifically geared towards short-term rentals. The first one was passed in 2014, actually created the property class. If you were around then, you probably remember the type 1, type 2, type 3. You know, you could have 3% of a certain district could have a short-term rental. There's just been all kinds of crazy ideas that the Metro Council over the years has attempted to regulate, and that didn't work. We'll move on to this next. And so it's complicated, but it's also extremely interesting, keeping up with it, not just from the real estate side, but from the political side too.
And it's, if it's not a full-time job, you seem like you have done a great job of finding your way in that and helping keep all of us. So thank you for that, because
no, it's definitely a full-time job keeping up with it.
I feel like I used to have the pulse, and now I just recognize every new day. I just know that I just more I don't know.
There's another second reading tonight on our short-term rental bill tonight. Creating 2 new employees with Metro. One that will be the head of short-term rentals. The other will be a head of short-term rental inspections.
Okay.
Whatever that person's going to do.
What's your thought on short-term rentals in Nashville? I mean, obviously it's been a big part of your business, but where do you see its biggest challenges, and how can we as agents help advocate and educate ourselves?
So there are benefits and challenges of short-term rentals, just like every other part of real estate. The benefit is that they truly produce more income when run appropriately, furnished appropriately in the appropriate location than any other residential use that you can find, and a lot of other commercial uses. I mean, they'll throw off more cash than a retail store or a daycare or whatever it might be. So it's a very cash intense business, both from the purchase to the furnish and to the income. I mean, it's just cash ever, cash out, cash in, cash out, cash in.
Yeah.
The driving factors from that, of course, are Music City,
Yep.
notoriety of Nashville, the growth of that started in earnest. You can kind of trace it back to when the show Nashville came on the air. Like, we were doing pretty well in tourism. That show hit. A year later, there was a noticeable spike, and that spike has not recessed at all. It is still on this meteoric sort of incline. And take out the pandemic years, everything that we're going to talk about, taking out that year and a half, just whatever. And that's where I put it in the dictionary of life. It's in the whatever
I love it.
category. But so we're still on this meteoric path. Case in point, BNA in May hosted over 820,000 passengers for the month of May. School was still in, no CMA Fest in May, a couple of concerts came back. Imagine what June, July, and August are going to look like here. They're going to break more records in terms of people flying into Nashville. The macro trend of people visiting Nashville, along with the macro trend of the ride share, have led people to stay further away from the core, which has led them to a possible Airbnb listing. That accompanied with the fact that our hotel rooms are the third most expensive in the United States, which is ridiculous. And that's just a function of supply and demand, right? That will fix itself eventually when more supply comes online. But to stay in a hotel for a family of 5 versus staying in an Airbnb for a family of 5, it's actually more economical to stay in the Airbnb. Not from the standpoint of just lodging expense, but then you've got food costs and all the other things associated with it.
You figure, I mean, if it's let's say it's $1,000 a night, which sounds expensive to people, but compared to 2 hotel rooms at 800 plus those food costs and other things, like you say, it's
that's it.
Simple math.
All it is, Airbnbs are just math. That's all they are.
That's why you love it.
That's why everybody loves it. All it is just math. And the fact constraining the supply in the way that they have has led to the price of these escalating tremendously. At the beginning of the pandemic, the beginning stages, April, May, June, the real estate market started, I mean, you all saw it, started to rise quite a bit. By July, August, September, we were in double-digit appreciation in the real estate market. The Airbnb market was flat, and maybe even some depreciation in the Airbnb market because the guests weren't really coming. By the end of that year, we were at 22% residential appreciation and 2% Airbnb appreciation. Last year, that all changed. Airbnbs went up over 50% in value in a lot of cases, especially stuff closer to the core. So there are people who put reservations down at buildings at a price that was, let's say, $450,000. That turned around and sold it for $800,000 and never occupied it for a day.
Just flipped
They
it.
closed, and then the very next hour they walked back in, the closing attorney, they closed again. That was what happened during 2021. That was the big correction for Airbnb prices. In 2022, we see a mimicking of the normal residential real estate market until last month. And last month, you saw a softening in residential prices. You saw no softening in the Airbnb prices. And that's because Airbnb prices follow macroeconomics. The macroeconomic here is tourism, people coming and vacationing. They're still coming. And they've booked these trips for months and months and months. And so, they're coming to CMA Fest, they're coming to see Garth Brooks, they're coming to go see all those people. And they're not canceling their tours. So these people are still coming. So what you're going to see is that divergence between the residential market value, which will flatten, not drop this year, flatten, and the Airbnb, which will continue to increase, probably at a rate of about 22 to 23% this year. Next year, you'll probably see Airbnb prices start to flatten as the tourism starts to fall off a little bit. And that's just based on recessionary economics of what's happening, macroeconomically.
Love it. Right?
So,
Questions? Yes, sir.
I have a couple of questions. So the restrictions on Airbnbs, would you say that's more of a hotel interest, lobbyists, whoever the hotel industry take pressure on the national government, or just more community related concerns? And then secondly, another question is, the prices of Airbnbs are appreciating so much. From what I've seen, and I might be correct, it's like a lot of the numbers just don't make sense. If I were to buy a business that doesn't have cash flow, like where's
the tipping point?
Yeah, what's the tipping point, and like what is the incentive to buy an Airbnb from these New York, West Coast, Chicago money if the property's not going to cash flow for financing the property? Like, what is the second worst alternative? Because that's what I'm getting really confused on my clients.
No problem. All right. So the first question is kind of threefold. One is that the only full-time lobbyist at the local metro level does happen to work for the hotel motel industry. That's the only full-time lobbyist.
Interesting.
There are other non-full-time lobbyists like Hall Strategies that work for GNR, that works with the legislative committee. If any of you guys are on that committee or not, you'll suggest that you get on it if you're interested in politics. And so there is a whispering in council members' ears. And for years and years and years, Butch Spardon was sort of coalesced with that hotel industry. But that divergence happened about 18 months ago or so, coinciding with the beginning of the pandemic. Butch Spardon sort of broke apart from the hotel lobby, saying, listen, all tourism is good for Nashville. Anything that gets our convention center booked is good for Nashville. People want to stay in short-term rentals. And so council started to split, if you will. There's still the hardcore 20 members of council who just hammer on them. And then there's the other 20 who used to just go along with it, who are now questioning it and going different directions. Brett Weathers is an excellent example. He's East Nashville council person. He, in the beginning of his first tenure, was hardcore hammering. And now he's coming to the viewpoint that Airbnbs are sort of a necessary part of our tourism industry. And as long as they're regulated well, then that's good for Nashville. Banning them is not good for Nashville. Putting stupid restrictions like a 100-foot rule between 100 feet of church, school, daycare, or park based on one incident in Colby Sledge's district. One incident in Colby Sledge's district led to a new law for the entire city.
His district?
Colby Sledge.
Okay.
In Wedgwood, Houston. So, I mean, that's the kind of stuff that a 40-member Metro Council does. It is a professional, non-professional city council, I would say. They're all part-time members, no one's full-time. It pays part-time pay, so you get part-time participation. And then you get a lot of, go with the flow type people who don't do their homework and that kind of good stuff. That's the bad of city council. The good of city council is that you get 40 different viewpoints. And so if you can actually coalesce a group of people into a pattern of thinking, then you actually have a pretty good opportunity to keep things like that from happening again. At the moment, there are 5 council members who still kind of hammer on short-term rentals. I expect more short-term rentals laws this year to come up. Part of the reason is because being tough on short-term rentals publicly is a very popular thing in the news. It's like being tough on crime. And so the general public sort of responds well to that. A good example is when Berkeley Allen was running for at-large member. There were 11 people running for 4 at-large seats. She was polling number 10. And then she introduced the RM bill, and she went from 10 to 3 within 3 weeks because she got just a blitz of public notoriety in all of the news stations and newspapers, and all of a sudden her name recognition is out there. So as we enter another election year cycle, I expect there to be more short-term rental laws. I hope that they're responsible. If they're not, going to fight stuff. The second question to your answer, or answer to your question, where's the tipping point? It's hard to really say because the flexibility of short-term rentals is the desirability of short-term rentals. A lot of people buy them not as full-time investors who are looking at cap rates and cash flow, income in, income out. A lot of them look at them as, I'm going to Nashville 4 times a year. Will this place just pay for itself? So I have a free place to stay while I'm in Nashville. And if it does generate some cash, cool. And if it doesn't generate any cash, cool, I still stayed for free. And so the institutional guys have long evaluated short-term rentals as an alternative to multifamily investing, but you don't see any big institutional funds or family office funds buying them right now for that reason. Instead, you are seeing more middle-class individuals who have some kind of tie or interest in Nashville. And then you get the 1031 exchange guys from New York or Chicago or California because they're looking for tax savings. And Tennessee is a wonderful tax haven. And if they want to use that as their first foray into permanent residency in Nashville, then a lot of them will buy an Airbnb. It's pretty cool, come 3 or 4 times. Then all of a sudden you get the phone call, hey, I'm looking for a primary residence. Because 0 hall taxes, no income taxes. I mean, there's a lot of reasons if you are a middle-class person near retirement to leave New York, California, Illinois, and all those high tax states, especially if you have residual stock income or bond income, or that hall tax can really eat away at that income. Here, it's keep it all. So that's why you're seeing it. And that's why you'll see what we'll call an artificial price high that's above what an Airbnb probably should sell for in a normal marketplace, because you will have those buyers fleeing those high tax states, as opposed to if you were buying one in California where you don't have those buyers.
Great. Sorry, yes, another question.
Where's this next big project?
We're getting to that. Listen, we keep coming soon till the end, so nobody leaves. The new laws, do you think they're going to be directed more towards non-owner or owner-occupied, both?
They've flirted with owner-occupied laws for a while. They've sort of they've run across a lot of roadblocks, especially from groups in military and nursing, where you leave for 2, 3, 4 months a year, and you want to have a way to generate income with that.
Right.
It used to be rented out month to month or whatever, but you can generate more cash as a short-term rental. And who really wants to look at a private first class or captain and say, listen, nah, you can't short-term rent, but go over there, defend the country.
Yeah.
So it's hard to regulate the owner occupieds. I think they'll continue trying to tweak it to ensure that those people are owner occupied.
Right.
There's a lot of people taking advantage of owner occupied status and not truly being owner occupied. We in the legislative committee and the realtor community agree we don't want anyone sort of gray listing that law.
Yeah.
We want them to all be owner occupied folks. So most of the stuff's going to be non-owner occupied, or it's going to be this -NS zoning. And so we have, as of 2 years ago, a new zoning that's across every single zone that is just simply puts a -NS at the end of the zoning. And that just means no short-term renting. And that no short-term renting is both non-owner occupied and owner occupied. And so it is a true.
I just want to accentuate the point.
Well, it's a true, I mean, it's a true down zoning.
Yeah.
They're calling it a unilateral zone, but it's a true down zoning because you're taking away the most lucrative use of the property. We've been fighting that for quite a bit, but a lot of the council members are starting to use that to down zone entire swaths of land, which is expressly the way they said they wouldn't use it. is the way they're using it. Probably the most egregious is our buddy Colby Sledge, who took almost all of Wedgwood, Houston, and downzoned it in the middle of the pandemic, where you can't do any short-term renting, and probably 75% of Wedgwood, Houston now just gone overnight. So we looked at that as kind of a property rights up front, that, you know, that nurse or that military member cannot short-term rent their property anymore. And that's kind of, you know,
Can
and
you elaborate on that specific bill?
on that. So that was an overlay that was put into place where all of
That
those,
was part of that.
yeah, that was part of the overlay that he stuck in there, is where he put in the -NS in that entire. So if you pull up that overlay ordinance, it has everything highlighted.
There wasn't one piece of that, like the overlay had several components and as part of it, kind of like tack on.
Yeah, I mean, it was like,
Tack on.
it was building structure, it was, you know, how far from the property line, it was garages, and all that kind of stuff. And then it was, oh, the station that's down here.
Yeah.
Right, and so if you made it through the first 75 pages, you know, then you saw that, and you're like, what the, where did that come from?
Which is where he took a page, I guess, out of Freddie saying like, we'll just go in and do NS and that's it.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, Freddie O'Connell is probably in one of the top five people who like to fight short-term rentals. Kathleen Murphy, who's going down the Charlotte, Sylvan Park area. She hates short-term rentals. I mean, I can give you the life story of most of these council members having, you know, either.
I'll share this. This was interesting. I was asked to run against Kathleen, and they basically told me, Ted, we've got $80,000 set aside with this group to support you to run. I said, I don't understand. What do you mean? They're like, that's about what it's going to take to win the seat. And we've got it already earmarked, ready to go. And then they started telling me about, you know, some of the polling and this is a full-on campaign. This isn't, and so, you know, what you get for this, it's important to understand because it, as you can see, influences a lot of our economics and use rights and all the things. And so it was a real eye opener as to the money that goes into winning these seats. And what you get is unlimited, you get access to health insurance through the city for life after you do two-year terms.
That's right.
So that's
For
the
now,
thing.
that's actually going away.
It is going away, but that's been part of what kind of creates this. But it just showed me, and I mean, I called on a parcel recently on someone, and they're like, we're not going to do anything with it. This is the gateway to this neighborhood. Unless you bring us something interesting, we're not going to hear anything about it. And I was like, wow, okay. So that person, and I share this because it's really important where I wanted to move is to how can we help? And it's really, I think, getting your neighborhood involved and you being involved. And so tell us a little bit more about what should be, obviously the Facebook group and going to the council meetings and getting on the readings and the hearings and understanding those things.
Yeah, our city council actually wields a lot of power.
Unique to other cities.
Yeah, most city councils don't have the property to zone or downzone or upzone properties. That's typically done in planning. That happens at our city council. We have the third largest city council in the United States, behind New York and Chicago. So LA, Houston, Dallas, all much smaller. Most of our peer cities, you know, mid-tier cities, let's say from 50th in population to 10th in population. I think we fall at 23, 24 right now. That includes Murfreesboro. I don't know how that happens, but have usually 10 or 11 full-time compensated members, usually have an assistant for every 2 council members. And it's run like a professional organization should be run. And they typically don't have the power to zone properties. They're dealing with the business of the city, not with the zoning and density of the city. Our city council is exactly the opposite. It is the Wild West. There are multiple city council members who are sitting on the council at the moment censured. One for a massive campaign finance fraud. He's still sitting on the city council today. One for pay for play, where he said, listen, we're going to be upzoning these properties over here. I want you to buy this parcel. And then when you sell it, I want you to give me $20,000. And that was recorded. He still sits on the city council. If you think that that is unique to this city council, I have been working with those guys for about 14 years now. Every 4 years, there's at least 3 to 4 members who do these things out in the open, not scared. It's total bullshit. But that's what you get from a part-time, uncompensated person who, you know, there's one member of council, I won't say who this person is, says if you don't increase your net worth by $1 million a year at doing this job, you're not doing it right. That's the kind of mentality that the city council has, a certain segment of it. And so I think it becomes extremely important for people to be there and participate at the city council members, at the committee meetings, on the legislative committee with GNR, and just make sure they know they're being watched, that they know something, you know, they're not going to get away with this small town, you know, mentality anymore. And it's prevalent. Now, that's not to say there aren't some really, really, really good council members, and there really are. One that I spar with all the time, Berkeley Allen, she might as well be a full-time, member. And she's been sort of semi-peacemaker in the STR world. She is an engineer by trade. And so she's a good example of someone who actually puts heart and soul into it. Brett Weathers puts heart and soul into it. He actually got fired from his job because he was working so much on city council stuff. But there's plenty of good guys and good people too. But there's also this underlying current of just horseshit.
Well, and it's just important, like we know in all of politics, to vote. I mean, and educate yourself on who is and why, and try involvement if it's not you, right? From the macro to micro to macro level, you know, starting in your HOA or being involved in your community, things like that.
Agreed. Yeah, participation is key, 100%. And so participation also in being a council member. I mean, shit, there's 40 of them. So someone in this room should be a council member. I'm not looking at her right now or anything, but she knows who she is.
Yeah. Mary Carolyn Roberts is a parks agent. She's with Village, and she is a Metro Council member, serving her second term.
She's cycling off. She said she's not going to run for at large, so she's done.
Okay.
So we actually have 4 realtors who are on Metro Council, Retro Council. 2 of which that I see as sympathetic to property rights, and 2 of which who I see as kind of not sympathetic to property rights.
Interesting.
So yeah, not all realtors are the same, obviously, either.
Yeah. We got a question from Crystal Morgan. With the Dayview overlay in some districts with RS zonings, thinking of District 5, do you know if those are eligible for owner-occupied short-term rental, or is that specifically for long-term renting?
The Dadu overlay that they put into place, and this is another Berkeley Allen bill that she's sort of championing along with, everyone actually got on board with this. This was the increased density in the city without really increasing density, you know what I mean? Without upzoning. They have made it pretty clear that non-owner occupied permits on Dadus are in residential zoning are just never going to happen.
Yeah.
Owner occupied permits, however, are going to happen as long as you're not within a -NS overlay, which would be, you know, Wedgwood, Houston, or there's other, you know, County Toombs has been kind of a massive downzoner in her district, which is kind of the Bordeaux, West Trinity area. Yeah, so you got to make sure that you're not in one of those -NS overlays or zonings.
I'm hearing that in a lot of the Dayviews, they're not allowing you to put, again, I could be behind the curve on this, but it used to be, you know, we would plumb them, but we'd hide it behind the drywall, and then we'd do inspections, and then we'd tear them open, they become, you know, a full-blown apartment after. With this now, they're sort of not encouraging it, but more allowing this more. True.
Yeah, they're allowing, it's basically giving you the ability to put an apartment over your garage.
Yeah.
Right. And it's not meant to be a true separate dwelling, like, you know, it's meant to be kind of an apartment, if you will. Like,
They
that's the
regulate,
spirit.
like, the oven, we need a cooktop.
Yeah, that's kind of the spirit of it, right? It's not that, you know, they don't want like a family of 10 living in the front house and a family of 10 living in the back house, right? Like they're trying to give you a little bit more. It was really rental relief density is the best way to describe it. It was trying to find a way to put more affordable housing options from a rental standpoint into the marketplace. That was really the true underlying intent, no matter how it was sold as a density bill, but it was really a, how do we solve the affordable housing? Well, let's get some more rental options out there. Turns out building a dadu is complicated. It's expensive right now. And so the rent is going to be expensive. So it really hasn't helped with, with
Really,
affordable
it's
housing.
short, it becomes another short term, because that's how the only way you make the numbers.
I mean, what's happening a lot of times is that the owner of the house is moving into the dadu, and then they're short-term renting the house.
Bingo.
And that is a, you know, if you're short-term renting a 4-bed, 4-bath house, and let's say you are in, what's a district where it's happening a lot? I don't know, there's so many of them. Yeah, Cleveland Park's the perfect example. Then you could pay $1.2 million for a house with a dadu, and you live in the dadu, and the house is short-term renting and generating $140K a year. That's a ton of money. Like, you know, for the average Tennessean, I think the average median household income is like 65-ish, 66-ish, double the median income to just host your house as a short-term rental. So you're starting to see how lucrative, I mean, again, money in, money out with short-term renting more so than anything else. The other thing I should say is that Nashville operates at a deficit of short-term rentals. And so if you look at the demand of short-term rentals, most of the experts say that we could support around 11,000 to 11,500 short-term rentals. Right now we're at like 62. And most of those are owner occupied. So
Most are owner occupied.
most are unoccupied. Yeah, it seems we always talk about investor owned. That's what the news does, right? It vilifies the, you know, the about 2,000 or so that are true non-owner occupieds, and yeah, that's what
Say
happens.
that again. What is the number of non-owner occupied short-term rentals? units?
It's basically 2/3 to 1/3. So there's 2/3 of them are owner occupied rentals, 1/3 of them are non-owner occupied rentals. So it's a vilified little small class of folks there.
Where do you see some good stats like that?
So you can actually go on the Metro website and you can actually pull every single permit with who the property owner, the management, the emergency contact person,
Nice.
the date their permits were issued, if they've ever had a citation. You can pull all that stuff right off of the short-term rental portion of the Metro Code's website. Like, you just download it.
Question. I would ask, what determines a owner occupied short-term rental? How long do you have to live in the property at a year?
So this is, again, part of the nebulousness of what they're trying to correct on the, what they used to kind of say was, let me see proof that you live there. Let me see the deed. Let me see a driver's license, and let me see a couple of bills, an electric bill or gas bill in your name going back to that property. Now they're kind of saying, sign an affidavit that this is your primary residence, that you live here. And for Tennessee, that means you live here 6 months and 1 day.
Okay.
And so you live here 6 months and 1 day, sign that affidavit. And then if we find that, and again, the city has some pretty sophisticated software partners now that can see how many days a year you're renting that owner occupied. And if you're going over 180 days-ish, you're starting to get a look. Now, you're not getting a ban, you're not getting a fine, you're not getting any of that kind of stuff, but you're starting to get a look. And so they're getting a little bit more wise to that kind of stuff.
What about the green counties around?
UP?
What about the green counties?
Yeah, so some cities within that county regulate, some don't. So like, for instance, we talk about Airbnb laws a lot. We really only are talking about parts of Davidson County. We're talking about kind of, you know, Hermitage, Nashville, Southern Nashville. But like if you, in Green Hills, but Berry Hill has its own set of laws. And Berry Hill, for the most part, is very friendly to short-term renting. There's just a couple areas where you can't short-term rent. You go up into Sumner County, Hendersonville has a ban on short-term renting, which is being challenged through a court case that's currently being adjudicated in the appeals court that may or may not result in being allowed to go to Gallatin, short-term rent all you want to. You go south to Brentwood, it's been banned for 25 years. And you can thank the Remnant Church for that. The remnant church is who was the onus of short-term renting and 2 families in one house, and you can only have 3 generations of a familial family living in a house. That's all because of remnant church.
Is that the Netflix special?
That's the Netflix special. If you haven't seen it, watch it. It's
Yeah,
crazy.
That's a good.
Franklin, it does allow it in certain places. So in the unincorporated part of the county, no. In the downtown Franklin, no longer. They used to allow it, no longer. But in between unincorporated and the city, you can do it.
Yes.
Yes, those are grandfathered in.
And could those be sold with the LLC trick?
Yeah.
So the LLC it's not a trick.
Yeah.
So it's just law.
Just lean in a little more.
It's not a trick. It's just law.
It is, that's right.
So, I mean, the law says that when you sell an LLC, it is not a real estate transaction. There is no deed stamps being paid. There is no deed transfer. It is a business transfer. So you're going to pay business taxes. The members of the LLC all can change, some can change, and you can do it any number of times. We've got Joey Hargis, Berkeley Allen, and one more member of administration on a Zoom from 3-4 months ago, where we asked that exact John Dotson, if you guys know him at Parks, great guy. He asked the question directly. He goes, I have one. I want to sell my LLC to you, Berkeley. What can you do? And Berkeley was like, well, I don't know. Joey Hargis is like, nope, that's fine. That's just the law. The Davidson County attorney, Metro attorney, weighed in. His name at the time was John Cooper, no H. So John Cooper said that is just the law, and Metro is not doing anything currently to pursue any difference. So the LLC sale, non-real estate sale, therefore your E&O insurance will not cover you if you fuck something up. So get other insurance.
So please don't mess with
I'm just saying,
Would you suggest getting an attorney involved in something like that?
yeah, I mean, do not work with a typical closing attorney, even though they can do them. If you make one little error and you file something with the city and they're like, whoop, something's transferring, then that permit's gone. And now the value of that property.
Are there attorneys specializing this with the amount of predominance of this, or someone?
There are, yeah, no, there are several. I mean, Grover Collins has been involved with this for a very long time. He is my current go-to for LLC sales. He's done 15-ish for me so far, and he has not messed any of them up to date. There is a court case going through right now of a very popular and a closing attorney that I've used a lot. I'm not involved in a transaction, but they screwed something up. The permit was pulled. And so now, and there's about a $250,000 loss of value. So there's, in Tennessee being a contempt, state, they're now getting sued for 3 times the amount. So 750,000. And guess who is one of the defendants in that? The real estate agent who was involved, who is having panic attack after panic attack after panic attack. So yeah, just make sure you're working with the people who know what they're doing on that stuff. And they're easy peasy lemon squeezy. They really are. I mean, it feels like a real estate transaction.
What I'd add is, I mean, just make sure to educate yourself about this. This is not something to dabble in or just go, oh, I have somebody who wants to buy this. Okay, this is much more complicated, or can be, than figuring out septic systems on raw land. So please, please, please. Any sources or recommendations of where people should go to educate themselves? Obviously, stateside.
Yeah, I mean, the stateside is so it's better just to get involved in things like this and just talk it through with folks who have been through it a couple of times. And so I've always said, if you're doing a transaction, I'm not involved in it, you need some advice, just call me, I'll tell you.
You will.
Yeah, I mean, half the phone calls I get a day are from agents asking questions.
Virginia.
You can as a non-owner occupied, you cannot as an owner occupied. So SPs, probably 99.9% of the time, will be treated as if they are an NS. It has to specifically be written in the SP that non-owner occupied short-term renting is a use of the SP. Doesn't matter what the underlying zoning is, which is what we used to say 4 or 5 years ago. If the underlying zoning is MUL or CS, then you should be able to do it. The interpretation that came down from, I guess it was John Michael, before Joey Hargis, who's now in his position. John Michael kind of said, listen, if it needs to be specifically stated in the SP that it is a use, and if it is, then you're good. If it's not, you're not good.
For those online, the question was, you thought you couldn't own a property in an LLC, true?
Which you cannot.
You cannot in an owner occupied.
Owner occupied cannot be owned in an LLC. Part of being a primary residence, right? How many of you have primary residences that you own in an LLC? The tax benefit of that sucks. So you own it in your personal name.
That's right.
And you take mortgage interest deduction every year, as well as, you know, I'm sure you have a home office, so 10% of everything you write off as well. So if your CPA is not talking to you about that, they should be.
And then quit claiming, you know, you'll quit claim out of an LLC into a personal name, transfer to sale.
That's right.
Yep. If you have other questions, raise your hand. I've got a few other things. Yes?
What are the bills that are coming up and what happened to the parking bill?
So I would say that the parking bill has died for now. And I don't expect Freddie O'Connell to be the person who brings it back. Berkeley Allen has been hosting a short-term rental symposium sort of thing for the last 5 months. They've skipped the last couple of months. I think she'll bring it back in July. I will send Ted the details on that. It happens in the basement of the courthouse. It's an official recorded proceeding where they're talking about how to better regulate short-term rentals because they're looking to create more laws. And so John Donson has served on that committee. Deborah Valle has served on that committee. Britt DePriest has served on that committee. One of those three is not like the other in terms of their opinions.
Yep.
And so it's been an interesting process. I think what they're talking about is regulating parking, regulating noise, which is very difficult, regulating how owner-occupied permits are defined and issued, and then just a whole host of other things like garbage and all that other kind of stuff. But specifically, the parking law that was proposed was it was going to require 1 parking space per bedroom and or sleeping unit. So if you had a 4-bedroom with a pull-out sofa, you may have had to have 5 parking spaces, which is unreasonable. Some from the builder community, but by far, realtor community is a hell of a lot more plugged in than builder developer. Like, believe that builder developers are not very nationalists. The realtors who are really pushing back on stuff. And then there were 2-3 speaking for it. And then when they went around the planning commission table and started talking about it, all their opinions automatically just kind of went, well, maybe this isn't the best ideas. And it went from recommended for approval to unanimous disapproval, which is the first time I've ever seen that on any bill at the planning commission in attending 40 of them. First time I've ever seen it happen. So the importance of showing up and talking is very high on the list of realtors to do. Now, I understand you guys want to go out there and sell houses, buy houses, represent clients, all that kind of stuff. This is part of your representation, part of your responsibility to your client base, right? If it's, it doesn't have to be short-term rentals, of course. It could be any other. I mean, there are so many bills that go through council. The agenda for tonight's 47 pages, and most of them are zoning bills. And so, in your district, pay attention to what's happening. If someone's up zoning, down zoning, or fighting a neighbor or whatnot, show up for them. Trust me, you will back. You put good out in the world and do good, like it will come back to you. So that's part of what I consider our responsibility of representation of the realtor community as a whole and to our client base.
Yeah. All right, we got to wrap up here. It is 11:27. You still good for a few more minutes?
I'm good.
Excellent. All right, so we're going to talk about a new project that you've got coming online here pretty soon. But I think first we need to know, what's your favorite bourbon right now?
Favorite local bourbon is probably a Belmead Reserve. Is a nice economic bottle.
Nice.
And the barrel proof Reserve is where it's at. It's probably $65 at the liquor store.
All right.
It is a solid bourbon.
What's the charity you support with your bourbon eggnog business every year?
So there's two, right? One is the Tennessee Baptist Children's Home, which is located, they've got 3 locations and they constantly are in need, obviously. And the other one is GraceWorks. GraceWorks really supports a very underserved community, which shockingly is more in Williamson County than Davidson County, because Davidson County has so many organizations that help. Williamson County, everyone thinks wealthiest county in the state.
Right.
Probably don't have a whole lot of people in need. Well, that's bullshit.
Right.
There's always people in need, and so GraceWorks is that organization that we support.
Love it. All right, you want to know what's coming next? You only have 2 minutes to submit your offer, and you got to get it in. And send it again at 12:01. Hey, it's a good strategy. I mean, what I will say, you communicate to everybody, respond to everybody on the Facebook group. If you're not on Nashville's short-term realtor group that Grant administers,
That's not even mine.
well, it's the best one to be,
It's the best one to be on. No, I'm the Central Tennessee buyers, and
which is another great.
yeah.
I always encourage everybody, if you're not on those, I'll post links to those. If you're not on those, by all means, get on those Facebook groups. Fantastic.
Yeah, so we have a couple of projects coming up. All of them are now zoned either mixed use or commercial or DTC, because as you know, there are no more non-owner occupieds in any residential zoning whatsoever. So that's R, RS, RM. So what you're looking for is something that starts with an M, a C, DTC. I'm missing one. What am I missing, Wendy? I'm missing one. Oh, ORI. Yeah, missing. So that's what you're looking for, the MCO or DTC zone. So we have a couple of projects. I don't even have them up on the website just
Yeah,
yet.
that's good. We want them off, Mark. You know how we are.
One
This
is
is all sold out. Everything is the stuff delivering even next year too. I mean, you've already sold stuff. for
yeah, I
next
mean,
year.
some of that stuff delivers in a year and a half. We tend to pre-sell the vast majority of these because, and I'll tell you why, it's not because we think that's the best pricing strategy, it's because it's the best banking strategy. Banks just super hate condos, and banks super hate condos that are short-term rentals. They just hate them. And so they require more pre-sales, higher percentage of them to be pre-sold.
Finance it to build.
Oh, to finance it. Like, you should see the appraisal that a new construction developer has to get in order just to get, on the approved list, even start talking about financing options to build a new condo short-term rental building. It's ridiculous.
So people think like, that's ridiculous. They want 25% down, non-refundable. It's like, yeah, it's what's being asked of us too. 50% or
So most banks right now are asking developers for 35% down and 50% pre-sold,
50%,
which is
before break ground.
before you
Before
even
you
get the
money.
loan.
Right.
I mean, if you see a developer break ground before they have a sale, that's their own personal money that they've put into the ground. And there's a lot of developers here in town that do that just to keep the process moving, because it takes code so long to issue every permit, every step of the way. And so the only way to really keep the ball rolling is to put personal funds up. So a lot of these builder developers are in $1-2 million bucks out of their own pockets before bank financing ever kicks in. So the first one I'll tell you about is right there, 949 Main Street.
Hey, yo.
This is Gallatin Road / Main Street. If you were in business 15, 16 years ago, there was a rezoning of this entire street, and there was an article in the Tennessean called Cranes Down Main, where they zoned everything on the street to be able to go to 6 stories. And Eddie Latimer with Affordable Housing Resources built 5th and Main as the very first project. And then Eddie Latimer taught everyone a very important lesson about why you don't just build 6 stories because you can. And he took that one in the butt.
Yes, it did.
That was a tough deal.
But you wish you owned it now.
But if you bought one, so I mean, some of those units are auctioned off. So if you bought one of those auctioned off units and you still have it now, your investment come close to quadrupling, at least triple. So 949 Main Street is zoned MUL. It'll be a 6-story building with 75 units. It's studios, 1s, 2s, and 3 beds. It'll have 2 high-speed elevators. It'll have retail space on the ground floor. It'll have a lot more amenities on a building of that size. So gym, a true residence lobby, all that kind of stuff that a lot of these smaller buildings don't offer. The retail space will be some type of restaurant or limited restaurant type use for the people in the building.
Do you get involved in conceptualizing and with the architects and developers, or?
So yeah, funny story. I get involved with other people's projects that I don't even represent. There are times where I'm paid a fee just to come help them with it. And but 949 Main is a really good tried and true team. Centric Architecture is the architect on that. Centric has done many hotel style buildings and Airbnb buildings. They did the Muse building downtown on Lindsley, and ZMX is the builder developer. So that's Bruce Mo's company. If you're not familiar with ZMX, Google them and you'll see that they do 500-door apartment complexes. They do, they don't do single families anymore, right? They're a big sort of commercial style townhome, retail, office, and multifamily. So that project is going to range. The studios will probably start around $299. The 3 bedrooms will probably top out around $900-ish. We're going to, sort of the new theory moving forward for these close-in condo buildings is nothing over $1 million. Even though you could support that with sales, the idea is try to get more of those flex people who are going to use them 4 or 5 times a year, rather than looking for those more true absentee owners. Because what you will get is people who care about the property a little bit more. And so when you have more doors, you want more caring.
Would you ever see it imposing some obligations or restrictions in that way to try to encourage some, or also rent control? Do you see that as being something that?
So in our sales process, here's some inside baseball. Even though we require you to send in the offer at 12 and send it back in at 12:01, and it's a full offer, and there's a cover page where you get 3 bites at the apple. We also do want to know if your buyer is a true absentee buyer. So in the contract, if you look down at page 17, it says what type of financing you're going to get: owner occupied, non-owner, third party, all that kind of stuff. And then we have a place in there for your mailing address. Well, that's not for the bank. That's for us to figure out, all right, who's local, who's going to use this, who's out of town, who's truly an investor. So there's lots of little clues that we use in order to determine. So if you get to the place where 3 people have bid on 1 studio and the high price, everyone's right around $330,000. The way that tie is broken a lot of times is the developer will say, all right, who's going to care more about the property.
For the general realtor that's trying to help win deals with projects that you're doing, what are ways that we lose with you? Calling you too much, texting too much, what are ways that we can help?
Opposite, by not calling, not texting, not emailing, and not telling me shit about you or your client.
Amen.
I am a huge communicate with me person. You know, there's one in our last sale at Starlet, we had one agent who was actually able to get 2 units. It was the only agent able to do so. And it was because she had called me ahead of time. She said, these are returning clients. They live in Virginia. They're here probably 2 times a month because they got a daughter who lives in West Haven. They've got a son who lives in Hendersonville. They've done 5 transactions with me, and they self-manage, and here's the platform they use, and you know, all that kind of, so I knew everything there was to know about these people. And when it came down to a tiebreaker on that very last unit, I was like, that's the one. They're going to care the most. So plus I find the agents who are more communicative are just better to work with through the whole process. Right? Like the huge teams, and you get the offer coming in from the, you know, buyer coordinator person, and then all of a sudden I get a call from the team lead, and then I get a call from the transaction coordinator, and then the latte person was like, hey, I need an update on this. I'm just like, I can't keep up with 4 people for this one transaction. So we actually look at that fairly negatively. We want, if the lead, I mean, I'm fine with big teams, but
Yeah.
we want that lead agent sent in, the lead agent to communicate. If the lead agent doesn't have time, I ain't got time for you.
Amen.
That's the way we look at it.
Any other coming soons that we should know about?
245 Hermitage, which is just south of downtown. This is another tried and true, so centric architecture again on this one. So if you follow Hermitage right into downtown, that's where you'll be. This is sort of, this area is changing tremendously. If you're not paying attention to what's happening to the southeast portion of Nashville, like you're missing the boat here.
Listen,
I mean, there's literally a bridge that is being planned across the river over here right now. It's in the early stages, but there's literally a bridge that the state is going to pay for with.
this road, it just seems to go right.
Yeah, where is that going?
with that.
This whole property right here is for sale with a commercial brokerage. They want a tidy 56 million bucks, and it's under contract.
Oh my God.
So there's a ton happening down here. You need to be careful with some flood zone stuff, getting close to the river. But if you stay on the Hermitage Road side,
This is such a gateway into town. I mean,
well, it's been an industrial gateway
Yes,
for
it
many,
has.
many years, right? You see a lot of high velocity cross docks, and you see a lot of warehouses. That's changing a lot. So it's a place to pay attention to over the next few years. So 245 Hermitage is a small, we're actually calling it Neo, because when we purchased that property, the Oracle announcement was just made. And so of course, Neo and Oracle, we also named another one Trinity because we're just goofy like that. And so it actually has a matrix theme in the building, which makes no sense for it to be in Nashville, Tennessee, but we've got
Why not?
things like hidden QR codes around the building that helps you follow the White Rabbit. And we're going to bring you into the new reality of Nashville. And so we've actually partnered with 3 or 4 restaurants that have, if you can follow the White Rabbit, you actually end up getting to a QR code that gets you a table at an exclusive restaurant that you may not be able to get
Make it
into.
fun, man. That's
Just to
cool.
make it fun and
Yeah.
different and that kind of stuff. And so, yeah, so that's kind of a good point. That's where the larger Airbnb experience is going. It used to be just, okay, how nice can you make it? How big is it? What does it cost? And how close is it to where I want to be? Now it's all of that plus the fun factor,
Yep.
right? It's like, what else?
Experience, just
Yeah,
like experiential.
it's like, what else can you do there? You know, and the fastest growing part of Airbnb's website is their experiences, right? It's the photography, you know, the selfie mural tour. That thing has like 21,000 people that have done it now. The
21,000 people.
21,000 people have done the
24
Nashville mural selfie tour. Whoever came up with that is a genius. Like, we need to put that person in this room and pick their brain. And so we're trying to add experiences to these buildings now that give your guests something else to do, because you're not downtown the whole time. There's only so many beers you can drink.
Well, there's so much more Nashville has to offer beyond 12 South.
Well,
I mean,
that's,
like,
yeah, I mean, that's it, right? Like, you're not just here the whole time. Like, how do we get them to go try what I consider the best banh mi in America in East Nashville? How do we get them there to get a #1
right.
at the banh mi on the east side?
Yeah.
Or, you know, how do you get them to go to Joyland and try a burger? How do you get them to go down to, you know, Hugh Babies, which looks like a fast food joint everywhere, but there's not. There's, you know, there's 4 Hugh Babies. Like, how do you get that to happen? So that's what we're trying to do, is connect all of that stuff in there.
Well, and be that realtor, put that on your social. Like, that's what people are watching and listening to and interesting. It's not just houses and other people's listings. Where's your favorite emerging market of Nashville?
This is crazy. What's potentially happening over here is crazy, because it is all large parcel, underutilized, transportation oriented or warehousing oriented stuff. A lot of crazy stuff is happening that direction. That some of it planned to gauge the riverfront. So if you remember, like right before the Great Recession, there was a planned project there that would have had a private marina and all kinds of stuff. Well, guess what's on the books again?
Come on now.
So look what's there right now, ABF Freight. So yeah, well, I mean, listen, if you, let's talk about macroeconomics for 2 seconds, if you've got some time, right? So I love this stuff. There will absolutely be a national recession, but what does recession really mean, and what does it do? What you should be more concerned with is interest rates than recession. So 3 things. One is the Fed is going to raise interest rates in June. The Fed is going to raise them in July. And it's going to be a 50 basis points hit each time, because the biggest fear is inflation, right? We don't want Venezuela on our hands. We don't want Brazil in the 1980s on our hands. Inflation is the biggest economic killer that there is. Well, what goes into inflation, right? There's the price you pay for goods, there's the income that you make, and then the spread between the two of those things, right? And incomes have been going up a lot during the pandemic, right? Over the last 15 months, we've seen the highest income growth in the country that we've ever seen. And we saw interest rates drop to the lowest that we've ever seen. So clearly there's going to be inflation. And we saw the labor participation rate drop to 57%, which is insane. Fast forward now, and you're seeing a curving of the salary increases, right? So it's starting to sort of level out, which is good. You're seeing interest rates getting bumped aggressively to the point where people are making decisions not to buy something like a car, for instance. Like, look at the car industry before you look at it's the leading indicator for the health of the real estate industry, right? So like retail, we always say retail follows roofs, right? So a retail commercial broker looks at the number of new construction houses in particular. That's what dictates what the retail tenants, their mix is going to be. Look at cars. Cars is what will determine what the trajectory of the housing market is. People stop buying cars before they stop buying houses. And so watch the car industry for that 3-month heads up that houses are going to stop being purchased the way that they've been purchased. A lot of that, again, interest rate driven, salary driven, and then consumer confidence, right? And so you've seen the erosion of consumer confidence over the last 4 months. It's palpable, you feel it. Some of you have even fed it on social media, which don't give facts, don't give doom and gloom. What we're in is a correction period where we had runaway inflation. That is bad. Was it easy as hell to sell a house? Yes. Did you get 20 offers on your house that you thought you overpriced by 10%? and then it sold for 20% more, and you were like, I'm a fucking hero, look how smart I am. Yes, you did. And that was cool for the time being. That is terrible for the long-term health of the city, the state, and the country. And so you've got to control those things. So I would look at this period as a prices leveling out period. We're still going to see 20% increase in home prices this year. We saw most of it already, right? We've seen what 16.5%, I think is what I saw through the end of May, increase from January 1st through the end of May. That's insane. What you're going to see now is the leveling off and the lack of people being excited to go make 100 offers, you know, and that kind of stuff. It's going to go back to fundamentals. It's back to, think of 2015. How was your business in 2015?
Remember when you prospect?
Yeah,
Remember when you called people back?
that's just what it is now.
We marketed listings.
Yeah, it's, you know, it's less of like, how do I get my next listing so I can get 25 offers and look like a hero? It's more like, it's just back to fundamentals. And everyone's like, oh my God, it's crashing. It's doom and gloom. Prices are going down 40%. No, prices are not going to go down 40%, especially not in Sunbelt states.
Especially if we stop saying that they are.
Well, look at, okay, macroeconomics says, even if you say it, if we all in this room went out there and said that prices are going down 40%, it's never going to happen. It's a simple math equation. It's supply, demand, consumer confidence, and a little bit of wage growth, a little bit of job growth. And if you look at the Sunbelt states, they are all getting a massive amount of population growth, right? Everything from Arizona through even a little bit of New Mexico, believe it or not, through Texas, all the way to Florida, South Carolina. And then if you look at the states that have no state income taxes that are in the Sunbelt, you've got Texas, you've got Tennessee, and you've got Florida. Those are the three states that are not going to get effed in the A during this little recession, right? Like there's certain, like Miami's overheated. They're going to see a little, they're going to give some value back. Austin's overheated. It's going to give a little value back. Nashville's overheated. It's going to give a little value back. Are prices going to go down 40%? No. Are they going to go down 20%? No. Are they going to go down 10%? That's like a worst case scenario. Like worst case scenario, 10%. I'm talking about during the entire recessionary period, which may last as much as 2 years. And it may be less. I don't know. It depends on what, you know, if you don't follow Janet Yellen at the Fed, follow her and see what she's saying, because she's creating the economic policy that we're following right now, right? Which is, most of you guys probably know, like MBS are being sold off. So mortgage-backed securities that the Fed was buying and buying and buying and buying and buying, they're selling. They're decreasing the monetary supply right now, right? So they're tightening the supply of money. And where you see that is in the reaction to the stock market, right? So if any of you guys have followed AMC stock, right? So several have, or GameStop, right? AMC is having itself a record year in terms of movie sales, right? Top Gun just broke every single all-time record. Jurassic Park comes out next weekend. You bet money my ass is going to be in that theater watching Jurassic Park, right? And so will a lot of everyone else, and breaking all kinds of records. But AMC is popping down. That is a macro reaction to the monetary supply, to consumer confidence, and it has nothing to do with how well is AMC performing right now, right? That stupid CEO bought part of a gold mine. Like, that's how much cash they had on the books.
Gold mine?
They literally bought part of a gold mine.
A theater company.
A
which we would
theater
all
company,
expect would be in the
they had too much cash. They part of a gold mine.
Where'd all our cash come from? Everybody's going to movies.
It was retail investors buying their stock, looking at the movies that were going to be released.
They knew this was coming. They projected, this is what you're looking at.
Project is coming, right? So sometimes macro doesn't line up with what's actually happening in the world, right? So if you've got friends in Cleveland, or if you've got friends in like upstate New York, or you've got friends up in outside of San Francisco, their markets are going to take a real kick in the butt. Right? The Rust Belt is going to take a kick in the butt. The Pacific Northwest and the Northeast, some of those markets could lose 20, 25% in value. That's a lot, right? That's not as much as they lost in the Great Recession, but they're going to take a kick in the pants. Sunbelt, we're gonna be just fine. The only difference is there's gonna be fewer transactions, right? Those move-up buyers are pretty much gone for the most part, right? So if they start feeling, okay, I would sell my house if I could get $1 million and I'd go buy over here
Yeah.
for $1.2 million or $1.3 million. But if they start feeling like, nah, I'm only gonna get 900, they're gonna stay.
Yep.
It's just psychology. But what they're also going to do to make themselves feel better is they're gonna travel.
Yep.
They're gonna drink more.
Yep.
They're gonna smoke more. That's just psychology. That's what these guys are gonna do, right? So if you look at the stocks that are doing well right now, alcohol stocks, tobacco stocks, travel stocks.
Yep.
That's what happens every time there's a recession. Everyone's like, how do I make myself feel better? Some people buy cars, most don't. Some people buy houses, most don't. That's just what's coming.
Y'all, give a hand for Grant. I want to invite you, a plug for future vTalk, July 12th, write it down, July 12th, Joey Hargis from Codes
Oh,
is going to be.
he's now the new #1. Now that Bill Herbert has left.
And we will invite Grant Hammond to return if he's so willing and interested for that fun show. July 12th, vTalk, right here, Joey Hargis from Codes. So any other questions, you can reach out to Grant directly. And again, thank you so much.